Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's presentation about community partnerships. My name is Dr. Lanisha Mako Ridley, and I am the co-project director for the New Jersey Family Engagement Hub. And before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about what the Hub is. We are a project of SPAN Parent Advocacy Network. We were funded with a grant from the U.S. Department of Education for 5 years on creating family engagement opportunities and enhancements in states and school districts throughout New Jersey. We are a centralized information hub where we try to bring together educators, families, community partners, and youth around all things family engagement. And we do that by creating collaborations and building bridges between those different audiences by using the tools and strategies that we employ in the hub. And one of those strategies is in-person workshops, along with online webinar series, such as the one that you're going to participate in today. But ultimately, we are here to empower our youth voice for the betterment of their success. So ultimately, by enhancing family engagement strategies throughout New Jersey, the goal is to enhance and increase student success. And with that, I will turn it over to Erica.
Thanks, Lanisha. So glad to be with you all here today for our presentation on creating meaningful partnerships for youth. So let's get started. So we'd love to know a little bit about you and who's here with us today. If you wouldn't mind letting us know where you're zooming in from, how old are the children you work with or your students, and then what your role is. Are you calling in as a parent, as an educator, maybe both? But we'd love to know a little bit about you. So if you wouldn't mind putting your intros in the chat. And we totally understand if you're on a cell phone and it's hard to put your responses into the chat, so no worries. But if you are able to, yeah, we'd love to know a little bit about you. Okay, we'll say another 30 seconds or so. All right, no worries. We are going to move on. Welcome to those who just joined us. And we'll do some intros into ourselves. If you feel like entering your information into the chat, again, we'd love to know a little bit about you, but totally fine if you are not able to utilize the chat at this moment. So, a little bit about me. My name is Erica Brenton. I've been an educator for over 20 years now. I started my career as a New York City public school teacher, and I got very invested in the world of social emotional learning, which is everything from executive functioning skills to self-awareness to emotional intelligence. And so I really decided that I wanted to spend my career doing social emotional learning work. So that's what I do now. I am located in Montclair, New Jersey, and I have two children who are age in middle school and elementary school. And so this work is interesting to me from a professional standpoint, but also from a very personal standpoint. And so I'm going to hand it back over to Lanisha, who's going to introduce herself.
Thank you, Erica. So, as I said earlier, my name is Dr. Lanisha Mako Ridley, and I serve as the co-project director for the Hub. Professionally, I have a background in workforce development and community development, along with nonprofit management. I actually participated in St. Elizabeth University's SEL Academy, so I have a certificate in school leadership for social emotional learning and character development. I live in Parsippany Troy Hills, and I have one child whose last day is today, and he is in elementary school.
Okay. So, our agenda for today is we're going to be asking a lot of reflection questions. If you're able to put your answers into the chat. We would, again, love to hear from you. And the conversation just becomes even more rich when we're able to hear from both not only just Lanisha and myself, but also from you. And so we'll do a lot of reflection questions. We'll talk about the roles that adults play, the different roles that adults play in children's lives and what those look like. We'll talk a little bit about why collaboration can be hard. We'll give you some strategies and support to think about how you can build trust with the children that you work with and also the adults that you work with. And then we will also provide some tools and strategies for how we can develop youth voice. So let's get started. I always love to start with a quote. I think that this quote is really appropriate for today's workshop. So, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much, by Helen Keller. So, we're going to really talk today about how adults can work together in community groups and organizations to best support our children. So, what I want you to do is I want you to think, and again, if you would like to enter your thoughts into the chat, we would love to hear from you. If you can't, that's totally fine. But we want you to think of a young person who's doing well despite having challenges. Who are the adults, the organizations, programs that have helped make a difference in this young person's life? So I'll provide an example. And while you're thinking about it and entering your own thoughts into the chat box, I'll just give you an example. So I have a 9-year-old son who in second grade started to have a lot of worries and big thoughts and feelings and anxieties and stopped wanting to go to school. He stopped wanting to play on his soccer team. It was a very difficult time for us. But all of the people in his life really pulled together to help and support him. So his teacher, his guidance counselor, his soccer coach, we just had tons of people and resources around us. So it really helped to make that situation a lot better. So any thoughts for you all of who are the adults, organizations, programs that have helped make a difference in a young person's life who is doing well despite challenges?
So I'll also add, my son is on the autism spectrum, and so there's a program here in Parsippany called Game with Friends, and I actually found out about it last year through one of his classmates' mother, and we both signed our kids up. My son has been going consistently, and so I was at the closing ceremony on Monday, and the woman who runs the program was talking about how they didn't get any funding from the state, and the program may change next year. And that program has really helped him. It's first of all, it's a program they have two programs. There's one like K-5 and there's one for the older kids. And it's really simple things that they do with them. But it has helped him come out of his shell. And I see all of the kids who participate are kids who have learning differences or are special needs. And so by the end of the school year, they're completely different kids than they were when they first went. So last year when he first went, I had to go in with him. I had to sit there. He didn't want to be without me. Now I tell him we're going to the program, and he jumps out of the car, runs inside of the PAL, and I don't see him for 45 minutes. So I said to her, listen, I'm going to help you try to get some funding so that this program can continue. So that's an example of like a program in the community that has helped, in addition to, the things that my family and other adults have done to really try to bolster him in his journey.
That's a great example, Lanisha. Thank you so much. And then Carrie also wrote in the chat for her support friends, school, and family at home. But that was a great example of a community organization. Thank you. So the question here is what helps, and we don't have to necessarily answer this, but it's just good food for thought. What helps young people feel that they truly belong? For me, I feel like the one thing that we can do for kids And the most low-hanging fruit is we can just know their names and call them by name. There was a study that was done of these dairy cows in Wisconsin, and they took two groups of cows, and one was treated differently than the other. And the one that was treated differently produced a lot more milk over time. And they found that the reason why that they produce more milk is because each cow had a name. And so that to me is one of the smallest ways that we can really think about helping young people feel that they belong. Any other ways that helps young people feel that they truly belong?
I think knowing what they like,
Mm,
who they are as individuals. Everyone is different. No one is the same. And so I think that we need to embrace people's differences and know what they like.
mm, that's
So
a
in
great
addition
point.
to knowing their name, which is absolutely important, you know, I think we also need to understand who they are as individuals.
Absolutely. So we know that it's important to feel a sense of belonging and it's important to feel a sense of connection. Those are feel good feelings. But there's actual research that shows that when young people experience belonging, they're more likely to do positive things in their lives, like take healthy risks, ask for help, persist through challenges, build resilience, engage in learning, and develop positive relationships. And so what we want you to do, because a lot of times it's really, really helpful to think from the point of view of ourselves so that we could foster these conditions with kids, is to think about a time that you felt that you truly belonged and what made that experience meaningful. So again, please feel free to enter your thoughts and ideas into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I'll share an example, and maybe Lanisha can also share one of her examples. I was thinking about this question, and I was like, when did I really felt that I truly belonged? And for me, it was my senior year in high school in my English class. And my teacher not only knew my name, but very similar to what Lanisha had just said, he really knew me and he really understood me and he would bring out things in me, these strengths in me that I never even knew that I had. And so I did really, really well in school and in senior year English because I felt like he took that interest in me. So any thoughts or ideas of a time that you felt that you truly belonged and what made that experience meaningful?
So I'll share a because I had to think about I
Yeah.
too had to think about it. I went to a women's college in Smith College in Massachusetts. Very steeped in, traditions. And one of the traditions that they have is, you go graduation day, you go across the stage, you get your diploma, but it's not your diploma, but they hand you the booklet, right? And after everyone gets their degree, we form something called a diploma circle. So we step away, we go to another section of the quad, okay? And all of the graduates form a circle. And we pass those diploma booklets around until you get yours. And when you get yours, you step back and form another circle. And it really resonated with me that, those 4 years formed who I was. I came into there, a girl who went to a school that was predominantly boys, didn't really have a voice. And I went to a school that embraced who I was. And I left there someone knowing more about who she was, having more of a voice and not afraid to use it. And so just seeing all of those women,
Mm,
that I went to school with for 4 years because it's not a large school, it's a very small liberal arts college. Um, and we all left there not having the same experience, but on some level we did because, those traditions that we formed and that we were a part of, really made us into the women that we're leaving the school with. And so that was very powerful to me.
that sounds like a really powerful experience. Um, and I think just the idea that you just said about rituals is a really nice idea to think about creating connection and belonging, because those are the things that really, like, when they keep happening and those rituals and routines are repetitive, that can make people feel really special and really feel that they belong. Thanks, Lanisha.
I also think, Erica, too, it's
Yeah.
important too when you have traditions in your family. You know, like
Mm,
um
good
our
point.
traditions are quote unquote our rituals, right? And so as a single mom, I tried to create some traditions or some things even that my parents did with me, I try to do with my son. So like I always put aside like the last week in August for us to go on vacation. Like that's our family time. And we pick, well, now I'm picking the place because he's still little, but eventually we'll pick the place that we go. That's our time to kind of spend together, forming those bonds before school starts again, before, summer ends. And I think so it's important to have those traditions within our families, in our organizations that we adhere to, so that we know that our children belong to something.
That's such a, I love that. I'm curious, I would love to hear if anybody in the chat room has any family traditions that they feel would be interesting to share. I'm going to keep moving forward, but if you have a family tradition that you feel like would be interesting to share, we'd love to hear your family tradition. So please feel free to enter that into the chat. I'm going to keep moving forward and share about our adults and their roles. So, we've talked about why connection and belonging matter. And then the next question is like, well, where do those connections come from? And so when we think about supporting children and youth, it's easy to focus on this one relationship at a time, right? Like a parent, a teacher, a coach, a mentor. But young people really don't experience one relationship at a time. As we've been talking about, they really move through multiple environments a day. And this sense of support is shared not by individual relationships, but by the network of adults surrounding them. So if we take a minute to look at this web of support, every word in the outer ring of the circle represents a person or group that can influence a young person's well-being, development, sense of belonging. Some of these adults interact with children every day, and others may only see them once a week, but each relationship really has that potential to make meaningful differences. So I think this is important because sometimes as parents or as educators, we can put enormous pressure on ourselves. So parents may think, everything depends on me. And educators may think I'm the one that's responsible to make this children or help this child succeed. And while those relationships are really important, the reality is that young people really benefit the most when they have multiple supportive adults in their lives. And research really shows that resilience is strengthened when children have access to a network of caring relationships, not just one. So thinking about maybe, your child or how you represent being the adult in a young person's life and how that is a part of a network of people who are really trying to support that youth.
And I would say, I would urge, educators, parents, there are a number of organizations that offer mentoring programs.
Mm,
There are sororities and fraternities, organizations such as Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the Boys and Girls Club, etc. I mean, there's a host of them. Look for a program that you think will, be a great fit for your child. And if your child is not old enough yet, at least be looking so that when your child reaches that age, you can submit an application. It does not hurt to add people to your child's village. And I think, that is very, very important.
yeah.
I grew up, with a family of educators. And even now, as an adult, I have mentors that I still rely on to this day. And so I think it's important to, always have someone or someone's there to support you in whatever journey you're going through.
That's a great point. And Carrie, I don't know if it's possible, but maybe if you wouldn't mind, just while Lanisha and I are talking, like some of those organizations that Lanisha just referred to, like putting them in the chat would be awesome. And then if anyone else has any ideas for community organizations that you would refer or that you would recommend, please feel free to put those into the chat as well. Um, so what we want to think about is what happens when adults communicate and work together, and then what happens when adults operate in isolation. And so I have a little example here of what it might look like for where did my cursor go? For adults to really focus on a child, and then adults really working together to support a child. So we have scenario A, and this is generally how I think we operate with kids is we have this one-to-one kind of relationship. So we have let's say a youth is struggling. Well, we have the parents' relationship to that child. We have the teacher's relationship to that child. We have a coach's relationship to that child. And again, while those are really supportive, very important relationships, if we think about having a network of relationships and really like a web of support to help a child, it really makes much more of a difference. So we have scenario B where adults are working with each other. So we have a parent to teacher, a teacher to coach, a coach to a parent, and just think about what kind of relationships and what kind of information can be shared and what kind of support can be gained by those important relationships working together. So when we think about, our own children or children we're working with, if we're coming from an education background, is really how do we shift from this one-to-one kind of relationship and really open up that network. So moving from scenario A to scenario B. Lanisha, sorry, I didn't see if you were
I
taking
think
yourself off.
one of the examples that immediately came to my mind is like the IEP meeting, right? So,
Yes, yeah, good point.
every year I have an IEP meeting about my son, and the school gives me the IEP. Now we can talk about the pros and cons of that. But anyway, um, but I sit down with, his teacher, his gen ed teacher, his gym teacher, speech, PT if he has it, his caseworker, right? But we're all sitting together and we're all talking about how we can improve um, where he is currently, the goals for next year, the goals for this year. And I try to make sure that I'm constantly talking to them. So it's not just a annual thing, right? I
Hmm.
think we need to do better about
The
quarter,
frequency.
yeah, quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my son is eligible for transportation, so I don't technically have to ever go to the school unless, it's a scheduled time. But I make sure that I go there at least once or twice a week to pick him up so that they see me, so that I'm checking in with the teacher. His case manager is outside usually helping with, dismissal. I check in with her so that they see me so that we can have these check-ins. And I think if we did that more with our community partners and add them in there, the coaches, I think they have a different perspective. They see your child in a different arena. And so they have something else to add on some other supports that may be needed.
Yeah.
And so I think I don't know a way to kind of formalize that. But I think if we come to that like IEP meeting approach,
Hmm.
but with everyone
Yep.
in the child's life, I think we will have some more positive results, positive relationships, and also better supports for our children.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So it's not just the a number of people who are working with the child, but it's really that frequency that we really can think about is how often are we doing these meetings? How often are we speaking about our children? So I know some new folks have joined us. So if you are, I just want to encourage you, if you are open and willing and able to enter your thoughts and ideas into the chat, maybe you have a really good example of a way that you've worked with other adults to improve a child's life. And we would love to hear from you. I'm going to just advance the slide now, but if you have an idea or think of something, we're always monitoring the chat, so please feel free to enter or add those thoughts in. So, we're talking a lot about the positives and the benefits of having these partnerships for children. But in reality, sometimes, even though we care deeply about our children, sometimes collaboration can actually be hard. And so we're going to talk about a couple of ways that collaboration can be hard. And then we're going to provide you with some ideas and solutions so that you can have really positive collaborations with other adults. So, if we're thinking about a network of adults working together to support a young child, families and educators and community organizations may have some challenges that sort of prevent them from feeling that they are a part of a solution for a child. So, some of the things that families might feel, and if this resonates for you, please let us know. Families might experience, if something is going on in their lives, they might feel judged or not necessarily heard. There might be scheduling conflicts, right? We don't know what families are juggling in their own lives in terms of their work and their jobs. There might be language barriers to really create that partnership. They may have had past negative experiences. I know I was a teacher, and so there would be parents who would come into my classroom and they would be very skeptical of me. And it was hard for me to feel that because I just wanted to have a good relationship with them and support their child. But they had actually had previous negative experiences with other teachers and sort of gave them a bad taste in their mouths about teaching in general and who I might be. So that's a reality. Educators, they are working on a very time crunch schedule. They might have just limited time. They may not be able to meet with us in the ways that we want them to. They have huge workloads. Sometimes families can be difficult to reach and competing demands. So, they may just really want to focus on academics, but there might be behavioral challenges. And so it's sometimes hard as a teacher to really say, like, okay, this is where I want to put my energy, but this keeps getting me off track. And so these are some of the realities that educators can experience. And then we have community organizations. So there may be a lack of communication. So something that's happening during the school day may not be communicated to the after school care that's being given. And so, a child may have like a really hard day, but if there's not that kind of communication, then a community organization that works with a child, let's say after school, may not have a good sense of things. Maybe there might be unclear roles or limited resources depending on funding. As Lanisha said before, she's really helping this organization she works for to get the right funding so they can continue to support her and her child. So these are some of the common challenges. Lanisha, I don't know if you wanted to add anything here.
So I
Um,
think I'll never forget when I moved here. And it was time to put my son in school. And, one of the questions they keep asking you is, you know, um, about your family background, your family dynamics. Who's the child's mother, who's the father? And I had to keep saying over and over again, my child does not have a father. And they looked at me
hmm,
like I was nuts. So I think it's true that you are always um fearful of being judged. But I think in order to make sure that you are, providing all of the information. I know it's hard to say because your back gets up, Um, I had to learn to put it aside.
Mm,
I had to figure out a way to just tell them the information and be very clear, like I'm not open to your questions. Like this is it. And that's, all that's all I'm going to tell you because they
yeah.
always have questions.
Yeah.
Um, and then in terms of scheduling conflicts and things of that nature, I think we all have to be flexible. The community organization has to be flexible, the educator has to be flexible, and the families have to be flexible. But I think in order to be true in family engagement, the one thing that has to be true is flexibility on
Mm,
all sides. Because it can't be, listen, I work from 9 to 3, and after 3 o'clock, when the kids go home, that's it. My job is done. I have never had a teacher tell my parents that they were done at 3 o'clock.
no, never.
But I think, now we have a different generation of teachers and they're and I think we just need to kind of like push that envelope that
Mm,
in order to truly engage with your families, we're never ever off the clock. I'm getting calls and emails at all times of the day and night. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't put barriers in place, in terms of self-care and things of that nature, but I don't think we should ever close someone off because they're available at 3:35 and I'm off the clock. So I really
right.
think we need to have some flexibility, and we also um need to understand that what is our mission, what is our goal,
Right.
and
Putting the
and be
student at the
aligned
center.
in that.
Yeah. I was always told as a teacher that whenever I was, working with another adult, or even if there was like a disagreement or some kind of conflict, that if you put the child at the center of everything, that really helps with that kind of
Yep.
idea of mission. So those are great, great points. So we're going to actually look at what does this actually look like, some of these common challenges. So this is something, I think is a fairly common situation that happens. So let's just say a teacher sends an email to a parent but doesn't hear a response back. I don't think that people wake up in the morning thinking like, how can I make partnerships difficult this day? Parents care about their children, educators care about their students, community members care about young people, but partnerships can still break down. So if we were thinking here, from the teacher perspective, what might the teacher be thinking here? So I'm a teacher, I send an email to a parent and I don't hear a response back. What are some of the stories that a teacher might tell themselves about why they may not hear a response back?
So I think the first thing the teacher might say, and I've been in some forums, and
Yes.
and they say the parents don't care about their kids. I sent them an email, I didn't get a response, and they don't care about
Right,
their children.
right,
And I think we really need to like reframe that
right.
from the teacher perspective. It could be, and if we go back to your previous slide, Erica, about um, challenges, it could be one that I know if you have Google, Gmail, whatever, sometimes when you send emails on top of emails, they fold into each other and I don't always see them, right?
Yeah,
That's one thing. The
yep,
other thing is I'm not an emailer, right? I'm a texter. So it might be better for you to get a quicker response because I only check my email maybe once a week. I'm just coming up with these things, right?
right.
So, but if you really want a quicker response from me, maybe you should text me. And maybe as a teacher, at the beginning of the year, you do a survey with your parents and you say, you know, ask them, what is the best way for me to get in contact with you?
Yeah,
And then that way, parent A wants email, parent B wants text, parent C might want a phone call. right?
Yep.
And so that might be a better way to kind of figure out how to best engage with your parents.
Yeah, I think those are such great ideas. I love the idea of the teacher sending out, right? Not only getting to know the child, but really getting to know the family and what works best for the family. That's a great idea. So we just had one more example because I think this is, another one that kind of pops up a lot. We could say like a school, but we could also change that to community organization, hosts a family event, and the turnout is low. So if you were the school, school staff members, what might you think about families? Kind of similar to what Lanisha had just said before. Maybe, oh, these, families don't really care, right? Or they don't really want to be involved. When the reality is there might be a lot of other situations happening where maybe there's transportation issues or childcare issues, or parents are working multiple jobs, or language barriers or scheduling conflicts, right? Feeling uncomfortable or unwelcome by the school. One of the things that I have found works really, really well in these kinds of situations, and it's a little tricky to do, is to just have free childcare. So if you really want to have a family event and you're really wanting to get families there, I would say two things that have always worked for me are food and free childcare. And that's a surefire way of, and also, something that I think is really also important is to see, and this could be done at the beginning of the years, like what parents do have transportation issues. Like maybe there could be a carpooling kind of a system. At my child's school, there's an enrichment program, and children who don't or are not able to have a ride, will let the PTA know, and then volunteers will sign up to take those children home. So, really, the idea of, not assuming that, families are not caring or they're disinterested, but really trying to understand the sort of underside of the situation, and then really, what are some of the solutions that we could do to support families and support schools and support community organizations?
I think also maybe partnering with the PTA,
Mm,
that might, assist. But again, I think not only should the teacher send out a survey at the beginning of the year, the school might want to send out a survey to see when is the best time to host events. It might be
yeah, that's a good point.
maybe Mondays are not good, or maybe
Mhm.
Fridays are not good, or, like you said, there are some families that the parents work third shift.
Right.
And so, so I think even sending out some type of survey, I know food now is a tricky situation. A lot of schools, grants, etc., do not allow us to purchase food.
Interesting. Okay, that's a
They
good point.
stop. I mean, for whatever reason, you
Hmm.
can no longer buy food with state funds or federal funds,
Yeah.
etc. So maybe partnering with the PTA, maybe the PTA can bring the food,
Right, right.
right?
Good point. Hmm.
So those are some things to think about in crafting your family event.
Yes, that's a great point. And then I would just say if a school or is not doing these things, right, is not doing the things that we're mentioning or suggesting, that as a parent, you could also suggest, right? Well, maybe the school could do X, Y, and Z. Like schools really need as much support as families do. They're very strapped. So don't be shy to take these ideas to your school community or taking these ideas to your teacher and really advocating for that kind of partnership. So then the question becomes, okay, so if we have this breakdown of trust, well, what actually helps people build trust with one another? And so we're gonna provide you with four strategies that you can think about when you're wanting to build trust with another organization, another adult in a child's life. So the first thing that we could do is we can listen before solving. And so what would that look like? Well, we could host sort of informal listening sessions, right? Like my office is available from, open office hours or something like that, so that parents can come in or, community organizations can come in and really, really speak what their minds. We can Surveys are really useful tools, right? A Google survey of forms is just a very easy tool to use, a great way to get feedback. We can have informal conversations and we can have student focus groups. One of the things that I've seen work really, really well in schools is to have open hours, like even in a community organization, to have, let's say, Mondays from 3 to 4, come in and share your thoughts with us. And if children are feeling a little unsure about that or feeling a little embarrassed, you could even have little anonymous boxes where kids can write down their ideas and put them in the box. And then no one knows who the idea or suggestion came from. But it's a great way to think about how we can listen to our children. And this is something that we had talked about earlier, communicating consistently. So not only when there's a problem. So that's really that example that Lanisha had shared with the IEP meetings that I think is, really important is how are we communicating with each other, not just when, there's an issue, but really in a way that is also building on strengths. So, positive outreach, something I used to do as a teacher is I would have a list of all the students in my class, and I would each month make sure that I either made a positive phone call home or I sent a positive note home to each child. I would check them off. So I made sure I got all of them. And parents were just so wonderfully thrilled about uh, getting these notes, getting these phone calls. It really helped to build that kind of trust. And I would say vice versa. If you're a teacher or you're a member of a community organization, sorry, if you're a parent, reaching out to a school or community organization, letting them know that you think they're doing a great job, right? So thank you so much for being my child's teacher. They're learning so much, or thank you so much for all the support you provide in aftercare. My child is really getting a very positive experience.
And you can
Celebrate.
also use, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry,
Sorry. No, go ahead.
you can also use I know a lot of classroom teachers, schools, they use apps like Talking Points or Class Dojo or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So you can always use those platforms as well to communicate consistently.
It's a great
I
point.
know my son's teacher, she sends out reminders. She sends out like little messages and then when they go on trips and stuff, she sends us pictures and that's a great way to communicate with your teacher, your child's teacher on a consistent basis and for them to communicate with you. So please make sure that you utilize whatever platform your child's school or teacher is using so that you can stay in constant communication with them.
It's a great point. And that really kind of um, sums up what we're talking about here, right? Which is regular updates, multiple forms of communication, celebrations. So, yeah, and Carrie, thank you so much for putting those links in the chat box if you're interested in looking. So this is a little bit of more of just building on communicating, consistently with positive news is to really think about strengths. So instead of having, a mentality of what's missing, we can think about what strengths already exist in our families, in our schools, in our communities, in our youth. A lot of times we could get into the weeds, I think, with, what's not working, what's wrong. But if we could really honor and really support a strengths of focused mindset, it could really help to build those strong partnerships. And then finally, sorry. And then finally, this idea of shared responsibility. So instead of saying, well, is it my job? Is it your job? Whose job is it? It's really about the shared sense of togetherness, of really building partnership. Um, and so, sorry, Lanisha, I'm gonna just read your chat real quick. Okay. I just want to say thank you and goodbye to Lanisha, who's going to pick up her son. Sorry for stopping the meeting, but thank you, Lanisha. They're the best.
Thank you, everyone. If you need anything, Erica's here. You have any questions, and we'll definitely answer them. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye. One of the things that I like to tell my kids whenever they're like, it's not my job to do that. It's not my job to do that. And I'm like, we're a family and we have shared responsibility in this house. If you're a part of the family, then you're a part of the solution. And so, really thinking about how we can bridge these individual jobs into how we can work together. So, just curious, we've given you a lot of strategies. Is there any trust building strategy that could have the biggest impact in your setting? So, anything that we've provided for you thus far that you think would be something super helpful for you to use? And please feel free to enter your thoughts into the chat box. If you're watching this as a webinar, just to think about what are some of the things that you'd like to take with you. I'm going to keep moving forward, but please feel free to add your ideas into the chat. So I love this question. I think because we are all adults talking about children, and I love this just question just to always have in the forefront of our minds. If young people in our lives, we're sitting in this webinar right now, what would they want the adults to know? And so that brings me to ways that we can consider opening up student voice into the conversation right now. Um, because we should not have partnerships that only exist around youth. You should be active participants in those partnerships. So if you look at this continuum here, when we talk about youth voice, it's easy to think that simply asking young people what they think is enough, but there's actual different levels of youth involvement. And this continuum helps us to think how much influence young people truly have in the decisions that affect them. So when we look at the first one, adults decide for youth. At this stage, adults make decisions on behalf of young people with little or no input from them. So that could look like creating school policies without school student input, planning programs without asking children what they need, adults determining goals for a child without involving them in the conversation. And there are certainly times when adults need to make decisions, especially when safety is involved and especially when children are quite young. But if this is the only way that decisions are made, young people may feel powerless or disconnected. And so that brings us to our next point here, adults ask youth. So this is where many organizations begin, where adults seek feedback from young people. And that kind of like we talked about before may take the form of surveys or focus groups or student feedback forms, or just asking children questions. And this is an important step because it communicates that your voice matters. But asking for feedback, and as a lot of us know, we've been asked our feedback before and probably don't even know where that feedback went. It doesn't mean they necessarily have influence. So that brings us to adults partner with youth. And this is where things begin to shift. So instead of simply gathering feedback, we can involve young people in the process of identifying problems and creating solutions. So students can help design school events, youth can participate in advisory committees, children can help establish classroom expectations. Families and educators can work alongside each other to help youth solve problems. So here, young people are no longer being consulted after decisions are made. They're helping shape the decisions themselves. And then finally, we have youth lead alongside adults. So this is the highest level on the continuum. And adults still provide guidance and support, but young people have genuine leadership opportunities. And so this could look like student-led conferences, youth advisory boards, peer mentoring, similar to what Lanisha had shared earlier with Big Brother, Big Sister, youth-led service projects. students presenting recommendations for school leadership. And so, the idea here is that we don't remove adults from the process, but the goal is shared leadership. So just, thinking about for yourselves, where do you exist along this continuum? Are you, making most of the decisions for children, or are you um, leading alongside youth? And I would say like there's no right or wrong answer, and there's no easy way to do this. I think it builds over time, but thinking about, how we really, really want to um, empower our children can really affect where we think about living along this continuum. So here are some other just suggestions for ways to elevate youth voice and leadership. We can have them participate on advisory councils, plan school events, lead service projects, mentor younger students, help identify community needs. They can help us co-create solutions, parent-teacher conferences. So you can have student-led parent-teacher conferences where students really show parents what they're working on and what their goals and opportunities are. I think that's like a wonderful example. So just a quick reflection of your own um, place where you are with youth voice and leadership is, where do young people currently have a voice in your setting, and where could they have a greater influence? So you don't have to necessarily put that into the chat, but really reflecting on where do they currently have a voice in your setting, and where could they have a greater influence? So just to close, we have a couple of closing slides here. Um, just thinking about one thing that you can do in your role to strengthen partnerships, and then one thing that you can do together that we can do to better support youth. So thinking about those two pieces of or points of reflection. And our closing reflection is, every child deserves to be surrounded by adults who communicate, collaborate, and believe in their potential. And meaningful partnerships aren't built through programs alone, they're built through relationships. Okay, Ari, thank you so much for chiming in. My apartment complex always tried to keep youth involved with movie nights and community sports, which is all while also taking suggestions. That's such a fantastic example. Thank you so much um, for chiming in on that. If anybody else has any great ideas for things that you do to involve youth, would love to know. Okay, feel free to enter in into the chat. And just so as we close, I really like this African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I hope that this session really lent itself to the idea of how we can partner together. And so just to close here, some ideas for community organizations that you may want to join, or you may want to have your child join, or there's tons of programs at the library. There's some fantastic after school organizations. Ours is run by the YMCA, but very, very cost efficient and really well run. There's community departments, recreation departments, youth serving nonprofits, and we had put a couple of those ideas and a couple of those examples in the chat. And then we have faith communities. So maybe you're a part of your church or your temple or your mosque. But those are really fantastic places where community comes together, and lots of adults are there to support children. And so just to close up, we have some suggestions for you for some books, some websites you can visit, some podcasts you can listen to all about this topic. And this presentation will be emailed to you. So you'll have all of these in your email inboxes. So you can go check them out. But tons of resources for you. And I think we're about time to wrap up here. So it's almost 1 o'clock. I just want to thank you all for joining us today. It was fantastic to have you here. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes. But if not, have a great day and look for more webinars coming up next month.